I work as a deep-sea diver. We found something on the ocean floor that explains why crews keep disappearing. The North Atlantic tastes like metal and fear at 300 meters down, where sunlight dies and pressure turns water into something almost solid. I've been making commercial dives for Oceanic Salvage Solutions for 6 years, long enough to know the difference between normal ocean darkness and the kind that feels actively hostile. Today's darkness is the latter, and it started the moment our submersible passed through the thermocline and entered waters that shouldn't exist according to our navigation charts. My dive partner Kwame sits across from me in the cramped titanium sphere, his dark skin appearing gray in the instrument lights, his usually steady hands gripping the control yoke with enough force to make his knuckles pale. We're descending toward coordinates, where 3 salvage crews vanished over the past 18 months, all of them working for different companies, all of them experiencing identical equipment failures before their final transmissions cut to static. Our employer insists these disappearances are coincidental, the result of faulty maintenance or human error, but the insurance investigators stopped believing that explanation after the second crew went down. The submersible's name is Nautilus 7, and it's rated for depths up to 500 meters, which should be more than sufficient for this dive. We're searching for the wreckage of a cargo vessel called the Atlantic Provider, which sank in a storm 3 years ago, carrying industrial equipment valued at $40 million. The previous salvage attempts weren't looking for cargo, though. They were investigating something else, something the company won't discuss in official briefings, but that gets whispered about in equipment rooms and dive bars where commercial divers gather after shifts. Kwame speaks without taking his eyes off the sonar display, his Ghanaian accent thickened by stress. Depth is 290 and falling. Temperature anomaly dead ahead, reading 15 degrees colder than surrounding water. The sonar is showing structure down there, but it's not matching the profile we have for the Atlantic Provider. I lean forward to study the display, watching green lines resolve into shapes that don't make sense. The wreckage should be scattered across the seafloor, broken into sections by the impact and subsequent decomposition. Instead, the sonar shows something intact and massive, something that looks almost architectural in its precision. I radio surface control, my voice sounding tinny through the communication system. Nautilus 7 to topside. We're seeing anomalous readings on approach. Can you confirm wreck identification from your data? The response comes back with delay and static. The voice of our operations coordinator, Felicia, barely audible through interference that shouldn't exist at this depth with our equipment. Topside confirms you're on target. Continue descent and maintain contact every 5 minutes. If you experience any equipment irregularities, abort immediately and return to surface. Kwame adjusts our descent angle, compensating for a current that's pulling us slightly east of our target coordinates. The submersible's exterior lights illuminate maybe 20 feet of water ahead, catching particles and small fish that scatter from our approach. At 300 meters, we should be below the range of most marine life, but I'm seeing movement in the peripheral glow, shadows that seem too large and too purposeful to be random ocean fauna. I mention this to Kwame, and he nods without speaking, his attention fixed on keeping us stable in water that's becoming increasingly turbulent. The structure on sonar grows clearer as we descend past 320 meters, and I realize with growing certainty that what we're seeing isn't the Atlantic Provider at all. The dimensions are wrong, the shape too regular, and there's something about the way it sits on the ocean floor that suggests intentional placement rather than catastrophic sinking. Kwame reduces our descent rate, and we drift down the final 30 meters with agonizing slowness while my heart rate increases and my breathing creates condensation on the inside of my face mask. At 350 meters, our exterior lights finally reach the ocean floor and illuminate what's been waiting for us in the darkness. I hear Kwame inhale sharply, a sound that mirrors my own reaction as we both process what we're seeing. It's not a shipwreck. It's a facility, a submarine installation built directly into the ocean floor, with modular sections connected by corridors and what looks like an airlock system. The entire structure is covered in marine growth and corrosion, suggesting it's been here for decades, but the architecture is unmistakably human in origin. I'm already reaching for the radio when Kwame grabs my wrist, his grip urgent and his eyes wide. "Don't," he says. "Not yet. We need to understand what this is before we report it." His paranoia matches my own growing suspicion that something about this situation is fundamentally wrong. Our employer sent us to salvage cargo from a shipwreck, but there's no wreck here, just this impossible structure that shouldn't exist, and that someone clearly didn't want found. The previous crews must have discovered it too, and their disappearances suddenly feel less like accidents and more like deliberate silencing. We maneuver the submersible closer, using thrusters to position ourselves directly above what appears to be the facility's main entrance. Through the observation ports, I can see hatches and viewports, equipment that looks sophisticated despite years of underwater exposure, and something else that makes my breath catch. There are lights inside the structure, faint but definitely active, suggesting power systems that are still functional after however long this place has been abandoned. Kwame is documenting everything with the submersible's cameras, his movements methodical despite the tremor in his hands. That's when the radio crackles to life without us transmitting first. The voice that comes through is distorted but recognizable as Felicia from Surface Control. Nautilus 7. Respond immediately. We're detecting unauthorized descent past your target depth. Abort your dive and return to surface now. The words are routine, but there's something in her tone that sounds rehearsed, like she's reading from a script rather than responding to actual telemetry. Kwame and I exchange glances, and he makes a decision by not responding, instead guiding us even closer to the structure. The exterior of the facility shows signs of damage, hull breaches, and collapsed sections that would have flooded the interior decades ago. But there are also signs of recent activity, equipment that looks too clean to have been sitting on the ocean floor for years, and what appear to be fresh welding marks on some of the external hatches. Someone has been maintaining this place, accessing it regularly, and going to great lengths to keep its existence secret. The previous salvage crews must have stumbled onto something they weren't supposed to see, and I'm beginning to understand with cold certainty that we're about to do the same. Kwame positions us near one of the larger breaches, an opening in the hull large enough for our submersible to potentially enter. I'm about to argue against this insanity when movement catches my eye through one of the facility's viewports. There's someone inside, a figure in what looks like a modern dive suit, moving through the flooded corridors with purpose and familiarity. Whoever they are, they're not from our mission, and they're definitely not supposed to be here any more than we are. I grab Kwame's shoulder and point, and we both watch as the figure disappears deeper into the structure. The radio erupts with Felicia's voice, no longer calm and controlled. Nautilus 7, you are in violation of safety protocols. Return to surface immediately, or we will activate emergency recall systems. This is your final warning. Kwame reaches for the radio to respond, but before he can speak, something massive impacts our submersible from behind. The entire sphere lurches forward, alarms screaming as our ballast systems struggle to compensate. I'm thrown against my restraints hard enough to bruise, and Kwame is wrestling with controls that are suddenly not responding correctly. Through the rear observation port, I catch a glimpse of what hit us. It's another submersible, larger than ours, and painted matte black with no identifying markers. It's positioned like a predator, thrusters firing in controlled bursts, and I can see a mechanical arm extending from its hull that's clearly designed for more than salvage work. Kwame manages to get us moving, firing our thrusters at maximum output, and sending us into a tumbling ascent that's going to give us both decompression sickness if we don't slow down soon. The black submersible follows, matching our movements with precision that suggests military-grade piloting systems. Kwame is shouting coordinates and depth readings, trying to navigate us towards safety, while our alarms continue their cacophony of warnings. I'm monitoring our systems, watching pressure readings fluctuate dangerously, and seeing error messages cascade across displays that were functioning perfectly minutes ago. Whoever is in that black submersible has capabilities far beyond civilian salvage equipment, and they're not trying to disable us, they're trying to destroy us. We're at 270 meters and rising when the black submersible deploys something from its undercarriage. I see it on our rear camera, a cylindrical object maybe 2 feet long that's trailing cable as it homes in on us. Kwame sees it too, and makes a desperate maneuver, rolling us 90 degrees and firing lateral thrusters that send us into a spin. The object passes maybe 6 inches from our hull, and I watch it detonate in our wake, creating a pressure wave that rocks us violently but doesn't breach our titanium sphere. They just fired an explosive charge at us. The realization brings with it a clarity that cuts through my fear. This isn't about preventing us from finding the facility. It's about making sure we never report what we've seen. The previous crews didn't disappear because of equipment failure. They were murdered, sunk deliberately with their evidence. And we're about to suffer the same fate unless we can somehow outmaneuver a submersible that's clearly designed for exactly this kind of underwater assassination. Kwame is pushing our systems past their limits, ascending at a rate that's making my joints ache and my vision blur at the edges. We're at 240 meters when our communications array explodes, literally explodes, sparks and smoke filling the cabin as something overloads the system from outside. The black submersible has electronic warfare capabilities, and they've just cut off our ability to call for help. We're isolated now, 300 meters down, with no way to contact the surface, being hunted by people who have the resources and motivation to make us vanish completely. I'm trying to manually activate our emergency beacon when Kwame shouts and points at something ahead of us. Through the forward viewport, illuminated by our struggling exterior lights, I see debris floating in the water column. Not natural debris, but wreckage. Pieces of metal and equipment that I recognize with sick certainty. It's the remains of other submersibles, 3 of them based on the different hull sections I can identify, all showing signs of catastrophic damage from explosives or mechanical violence. These are the previous crews, left scattered on the ocean floor as warnings or trophies. The black submersible is still behind us, closing the distance despite Kwame's desperate maneuvering. At 220 meters, our thrusters start overheating, warning lights indicating we're about to lose propulsion entirely. Kwame makes a decision that's either brilliant or suicidal, shutting down our systems almost completely and letting us drift, playing dead in the hope that our pursuer will think we've been disabled. We sit in near darkness, just emergency lighting and the hum of life support, while the black submersible passes within 20 feet of our position. I can see into its cockpit through their viewports, and what I see makes my blood freeze. The pilot is wearing a suit marked with the Oceanic Salvage Solutions logo, our employer's insignia, which means this isn't an external threat. Our own company is eliminating crews who discover this facility, using military-grade equipment to murder their own employees and covering it up as disappearances. The scale of this conspiracy suddenly becomes clear, and I understand with terrible certainty that Felicia and whoever else is on our support ship are complicit in whatever is about to happen to us. The black submersible continues its search pattern, moving away from our position but not leaving the area. Kwame and I communicate in whispers, planning our next move with the understanding that our survival depends on getting to the surface and exposing this before our company can spin another story about equipment failure. But we're still 200 meters down with damaged systems and no communications, and even if we make it to the surface, we'll be arriving at a ship full of people who want us dead. Kwame suggests something insane. He wants to go back down to the facility, use its structure as cover, and try to access its interior to find evidence of what's being hidden here. His logic is that if we're going to die anyway, we might as well try to understand why, and maybe find something we can use as leverage. I want to argue, to insist we focus on survival rather than investigation, but I know he's right. Our best chance of living through this is gathering evidence so damning that killing us becomes more dangerous than letting us live. We restart our systems and begin a controlled descent, keeping our profile low and our lights off to avoid detection. The black submersible is 100 meters away searching the debris field when we slip past and head back toward the facility. At 300 meters, the structure's lights become visible again, that eerie glow from within suggesting someone is home and active. Kwame guides us toward the breach we'd identified earlier, the one large enough for our submersible to enter, and I'm checking our hull integrity readings while my heart pounds against my ribs. We slip through the breach into flooded corridors that were once pressurized spaces designed for human occupation. The facility's interior is a nightmare of corrosion and marine growth, but I can still identify its purpose from the equipment and layout. This was a research station, specifically focused on deep-sea mining based on the core samples and geological surveys I can see through viewport windows. But there's something else here, too. Documents and equipment that suggest the mining operation was cover for something else entirely. Kwame maneuvers us deeper into the facility, following corridors that branch and intersect in ways that feel deliberately confusing. We're looking for the central control room or any space that might contain records when we find it, a section of the facility that's still somehow maintaining pressure and atmosphere. Through a viewport, I can see a chamber that's not flooded, with functioning lights and equipment that's been recently used. There are computers, communication arrays, and what looks like surveillance systems all powered by generators that are still running decades after this place was supposedly abandoned. That's when we see the bodies. They're floating in one of the flooded sections adjacent to the pressurized chamber, preserved by the cold water and lack of oxygen. I count 5 of them, all wearing modern dive suits, all showing signs of violent death. These are members of the previous salvage crews, their bodies hidden here rather than allowed to float to the surface where they might be recovered. Someone has been using this facility as a disposal site, a place to hide the evidence of systematic murder. Kwame is documenting everything with our cameras when we hear it, the sound of another submersible entering the facility behind us. The black submersible has found us, and it's blocking our only exit. We're trapped inside this underwater tomb with a killer, and our options have just reduced to fight or hide in the hope that they give up searching. Kwame kills our exterior lights, and we drift into a side chamber, watching through our viewports as the black submersible's illumination sweeps through the corridors, methodically searching for us. I'm about to suggest we try to disable their thrusters when I notice something about the pressurized chamber. There's an airlock that's cycling, its indicators showing red to green, which means someone is inside the facility's habitable section right now. Through the viewport, I see the figure from earlier, the diver we'd spotted, and now I can see their face through their helmet. It's a woman maybe 40 years old, and she's moving with the urgency of someone who knows they're running out of time. She's gathering equipment, stuffing documents into waterproof containers, and I realize she's not part of the conspiracy. She's evidence, a survivor or witness who's been hiding in this facility, using it as shelter while trying to stay alive. The black submersible is searching for her as much as it's searching for us, which means she has information our employer desperately wants suppressed. Kwame sees her too, and makes a decision, maneuvering our submersible closer to the viewport and activating our exterior speakers. The sound quality is terrible through water and pressure, but we manage to get her attention. She freezes when she sees us, her expression shifting from fear to calculation to what might be hope. She moves to a control panel and activates something, and suddenly our communications system, which was supposedly destroyed, crackles to life with her voice. Don't trust your surface team. Don't trust Oceanic Salvage. They killed everyone who found this place because of what we discovered. My name is Dr. Yara Okonkwo, and I've been trapped here for 4 months since my research team was murdered. Her story comes out in desperate fragments while the black submersible continues its search nearby. She was part of a geological survey team, legitimate scientists working under contract for what they thought was standard deep-sea mining research. But they discovered something else, evidence that this facility had been conducting illegal medical experiments decades ago, using deep-sea pressure and isolation to test biological weapons or psychological manipulation techniques. She wasn't sure which. The experiments had been covered up when the facility was officially decommissioned, but someone had reactivated it recently, and anyone who came close to uncovering the truth was being eliminated. The previous salvage crews weren't just in the wrong place at the wrong time. They'd been sent here deliberately, lured with salvage contracts for wrecks that didn't exist, so they could be disposed of in ways that looked like accidents. Dr. Okonkwo had survived only because she'd been inside the pressurized section when her team was killed, and she'd been living off the facility's still-functioning life support while trying to gather enough evidence to expose the conspiracy. But she was running out of time. Her air supplies were nearly depleted, and the people hunting her had been getting more aggressive in their search patterns. Kwame asks the obvious question, why not just flood the entire facility and kill you? Dr. Okonkwo's answer chills me, because they don't know exactly what evidence I have or where I've hidden it. If they destroy the facility, they risk leaving physical proof that could be recovered later. They need to find me, confirm what I know, and then eliminate everything simultaneously. But I've been moving the evidence, hiding it in places they can't easily reach, and I've been documenting their search patterns to prove this isn't abandonment. It's active murder. The black submersible is getting closer to our position, its pilot methodically clearing each chamber. We have maybe 5 minutes before they find us, and Dr. Okonkwo is trying to explain where she's hidden the most damaging evidence when our submersible is suddenly rocked by another impact. The black submersible has found us and deployed its mechanical arm, grabbing our hull with crushing force and beginning to drag us out of our hiding spot. Kwame is fighting the controls, trying to break free, but we're severely outmatched. I make a desperate decision, overriding our safety protocols and activating our emergency ballast release. Thousands of pounds of weight drop away simultaneously, and our submersible shoots upward with violent acceleration that slams both of us against our restraints. The black submersible tries to hold on, but the forces involved are too great, and its mechanical arm releases, leaving us rocketing toward the surface at speeds that are definitely going to cause decompression injuries. Behind us, I can see the black submersible attempting to follow, but Dr. Okonkwo has done something from inside the facility. Explosive charges are detonating throughout the structure, not enough to collapse it entirely, but enough to create massive pressure waves and debris clouds that force the black submersible to retreat or be destroyed. She's covering our escape with the last of her resources, and I understand with sick certainty that she's not planning to survive this. We're at 150 meters and rising when Kwame starts seizing, the bends hitting him hard from our rapid ascent. I'm not much better, feeling joint pain and breathing difficulties that signal my own nitrogen bubbles forming in tissues that can't handle this pressure change. But we're alive and rising, and Dr. Okonkwo's voice is still in our headsets, giving us coordinates where she's hidden physical evidence, locations scattered across the ocean floor that will require multiple recovery missions to collect, but that together tell the complete story of what happened here. At 80 meters, our damaged systems start failing completely. Thruster control is lost, then our ballast systems, and we're rising in an uncontrolled ascent that's going to result in us exploding through the surface like a breaching whale. Kwame is unconscious now, blood trickling from his nose and ears, and I'm barely holding on to consciousness while trying to manually control anything that will slow our ascent. The surface is approaching fast, visible as lighter darkness above us, and I'm bracing for impact when something else appears in the water above us. It's another vessel, not our support ship, but something larger and official-looking. Through our forward viewport, I can see the hull markings of a Coast Guard cutter, and I realize that someone has responded to our situation. Probably Dr. Okonkwo sent an emergency beacon before we found her, alerting authorities that might not be compromised. The Coast Guard has deployed divers who are attempting to intercept us, grabbing onto our hull and deploying emergency parachutes to slow our ascent. We break the surface with bone-jarring force that cracks one of our viewports, but the Coast Guard's intervention has saved us from the worst of it. Within minutes, we're being hauled onto the deck of their cutter, medical personnel cutting open our submersible and extracting us while I'm trying to explain what we found and what happened. Kwame is rushed to a decompression chamber, and I'm following on a stretcher when I see our support ship in the distance, the Oceanic Salvage Solutions vessel that was supposed to be coordinating our dive. The Coast Guard captain, a no-nonsense woman named Leslie Kimura, is already on her radio coordinating with multiple agencies. She tells me they received an automated distress signal from depth 4 hours ago, long before our communications were destroyed, which means Dr. Okonkwo had been preparing for this scenario and had activated emergency systems we never saw. The signal included coordinates, encrypted files, and allegations of corporate malfeasance that had triggered a multi-agency response involving Coast Guard, FBI, and naval investigators. Our support ship is being boarded by federal agents as I watch, personnel being detained and the vessel being seized as a crime scene. Captain Kimura shows me footage from their drone, images of the black submersible surfacing 300 meters from our position and being immediately intercepted by Coast Guard vessels. The pilot is being arrested, and preliminary identification shows he's former military, now contracted to a security firm that has extensive ties to Oceanic Salvage Solutions' parent corporation. The next 72 hours are a blur of medical treatment, debriefing, and depositions. Kwame survives his decompression injuries, but will need months of rehabilitation. Dr. Okonkwo's automated systems continued broadcasting from the facility for 6 hours after our escape, uploading terabytes of data that document not just the recent murders but decades of cover-ups related to the original experiments. The evidence she compiled is damning and comprehensive, proof of systematic elimination of witnesses and active conspiracy to conceal illegal research. The full scope of the conspiracy emerges slowly through investigations. The underwater facility had been a Cold War-era installation conducting experiments on human subjects under extreme pressure, testing everything from physiological limits to psychological manipulation in isolation. When the program was officially ended, the facility was supposed to be dismantled, but instead it was sealed and forgotten, or so the official record claimed. In reality, a small group of officials and corporate interests had maintained the facility for decades, using it for purposes that ranged from illegal medical research to disposal of inconvenient evidence. When deep-sea mining and salvage operations expanded into the area, the facility's existence became a liability. Rather than risk exposure, the conspirators had developed a system for eliminating anyone who came close to discovering it, staging equipment failures and accidents that would be written off as the inherent dangers of deep-sea work. The The previous 3 salvage crews were deliberately sent to coordinates near the facility, then eliminated when they found it. We were supposed to be the 4th such elimination, but Dr. Okonkwo's survival and her emergency preparations had finally broken the cycle. The trials that follow span 18 months and involve testimony from hundreds of witnesses. Executives from Oceanic Salvage Solutions are convicted on charges ranging from conspiracy to commit murder to obstruction of justice. The security contractors who piloted the black submersible received sentences for attempted murder and federal weapons charges. Felicia, our operations coordinator who'd been feeding information to the conspirators, turned state's evidence in exchange for reduced charges, and her testimony helps identify additional co-conspirators throughout the corporate structure. Dr. Okonkwo's body is never recovered from the facility, which partially collapsed during the explosive charges she detonated to cover our escape. But her legacy is preserved in the evidence she compiled and the lives she saved through her sacrifice. A memorial is established at the site, marked by a buoy that warns passing vessels of the historic tragedy below, and her name is honored among scientific communities for her courage in exposing institutional evil. Kwame and I are awarded compensation from the criminal proceedings, money that feels like blood payment for nearly being murdered by our employer. We both leave commercial diving, unable to return to work that carries too many traumatic memories. Kwame returns to Ghana and opens a dive school for recreational divers, teaching safety and ethics with a passion born from survival. I take a position teaching maritime law and safety protocols, using our story as a case study in what happens when corporate interests prioritize profit over human life. 5 years later, I'm standing on the deck of a research vessel, watching as proper archaeological teams excavate the facility under controlled conditions. They've found evidence of at least 40 victims from the original experiments, bodies that were buried in collapsed sections or disposed of in ways that prevented discovery. Each one represents a story of suffering and concealment, a life sacrificed to ambitions that seemed justified at the time but were ultimately monstrous. The ocean keeps its secrets well, but sometimes, when enough people refuse to look away, even the darkest depths must yield their truth. Dr. Yara Okonkwo made sure of that, and her final transmission continues to echo across every dive I'll never make again. Some discoveries cost everything, but silence costs more. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.